technical evangelist at Tableau and author of the Big Book of Dashboards. We're joined today by Alex and Marie from The Economist. I will ask them to introduce themselves in a moment. We're going to be talking about some really cool stuff. First of all, the Big Mac Index. It's a really great dashboard and it's part of The Economist's website and they've redesigned it. So we'll get some details of what happened there. Then we're going to look at some of Marie's work, specifically, how do you design charts for social media and drive engagement that way, and possibly look at lessons that we can learn in business from that. And then finally, we think a lot about education and how we can create better data analysts and better data journalists. So we'll be getting some tips on how you can get a career in data journalism and data analysis. So we'll go for about, 45 minutes, half an hour, depending on how we go. But if you have something that you want to know, then please type the question in the comments box and we'll try and take those throughout the live stream and we'll do a Q&A section at the end as well. So type in your questions. I've got loads of stuff I could talk to these two about, but I really want to get your feedback too. So I'm very pleased to have with us two members of The Economist's graphic team. We've got Alex and Marie, and I'd like them to introduce themselves before we get going. So Alex, hello, thanks for joining us.
Hi Andy, thanks for having us.
Say a little word about yourself and what you do.
So I'm Alex. I run The Economist data journalism team. We make all the charts and maps for the newspaper and our various apps and websites. And some of our team write data journalism stories for the paper too.
Great, thanks very much. And Marie, hello. You want to say a few words?
Thanks for having us. I think I'm pretty much the newest addition to the team, and I've got a ritual. So I work for the social media team and the data team, and I run my own project to make our charts stand out on social media.
Brilliant. That's great. And how long have you been with the data team, Marie?
Since November last year.
And how about you, Alex?
I joined at the beginning of 2015, which is when the data team was formed. So great. 3.5 years it's been going.
3.5 years ago. Great. Well, thanks for joining us. So topic one is the Big Mac Index. Strange name, but a really good tool, and it's been redesigned recently. So what I'd love you to do is just tell us a little bit about the Big Mac Index and the redesign, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So the Big Mac Index as a concept has been around since 1986. One of our editors thought it would be an interesting way of talking about currency valuation and purchasing power parity. So the idea is you look at the price of usually a basket of goods in lots of different countries, and over time they should even out. They chose to do it with the price of a Big Mac. It's been online as an interactive dashboard since 2012, which is a lifetime ago in data visualization terms. So we, as a project, we wanted to redesign it to make it work on every device, so mobiles, tablets, and desktops, and also get some feedback from the people who use it the most about what they use it for, what features they want to keep, and also to do some kind of analytics about what people were and weren't using.
Brilliant. So yeah, it's been around for a long time. We were delighted to feature the original one, which is on screen now in our book, the Big Book of Dashboards. But tell us about the redesign and some of the thinking behind it and some of the user feedback you'd had.
So we added a survey to the original index in January, and we left it running for about a month, and we got well over 1,000 responses, which was it showed us how well used and well loved the tool was. We asked people whether they found it easy to use, whether they understood the concepts, and then we kind of had a free text field at the end for people to tell us other things they'd like to see. One of the most common things was people wanted a bit more explanation about what purchasing power parity really was and how it worked. So that was kind of the focus of our redesign. We wanted to have that really up front and center. So you're going to kindly scroll up. So we've kind of split it into a very simple 3 sort of panel story about what PPP means. So that I think helps people who come to it for the first time to understand what we're showing.
Yeah.
And then we kind of felt that people are really interested in how their currency or how currency of a country they might be about to visit performs against the dollar or another base currency. And we've seen from the users, we've got people from Zambia, South Korea, Mauritania visiting, from every country really in the world. We unfortunately don't carry every country, but we definitely have enough currencies for interest from people all around the world. So we wanted to sort of show the ranking as upfront as possible. So that's the whole left-hand panel, and also to give people a sort of time series look at how currencies have performed against a base currency.
Brilliant. So tell me a little bit about the survey feedback, because getting feedback can be quite a humbling experience, you know, when you pour a lot of time and energy into thinking you're getting this right, and then end users give you all sorts of information you maybe didn't expect. It must have been a valuable exercise, right?
It really was. I was sort of slightly worried and slightly hopeful that everyone would say, I don't like the old one, give me something new. That's not what we found. People were, there's a real mixture of people who are coming for the first time. About half the users were experiencing it for the first time, but 35–40% had used it 2 to 10 times before. So we knew that it was a sort of a repeat destination for people. Yeah. So we wanted to make sure that we were redesigning it in a way that was easy for first timers, but that the people who've been using it for a long time wouldn't feel alienated by the new experience. We also found, interestingly, that over a quarter of visitors were coming to the interactive for an academic assignment. So we kind of had a feeling that it might be being used in schools or, you know, universities, Economics 101, to kind of illustrate how PPP works. So we wanted to make sure that it still worked for those people who are sort of experiencing from that point of view.
So that's a very diverse audience, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's very hard to please. Well, it's very hard to please one person with a dashboard design. In my experience, it's even harder to please a lot of people a lot of the time. Tell us a little bit about the redesign you did, because I know you went through many iterations, which is great, even starting from a piece of paper. Yeah,
we've only shared a handful of the iterations with you. We've got plenty more, but we don't want to overwhelm. So we did. It's not like designing an interactive from scratch. We knew that there were components we definitely wanted to keep in. We argued for a long time about whether to have a map in there. I favor the map just from a cosmetic sort of point of view, but the designer made a very sort of good point that we're not really highlighting regional trends. It's very hard to click on the smaller countries.
Yeah.
And we're not showing over 100 countries on there. So we decided to really focus on the index and then the time series of how currencies have performed. But we played around with lots of different techniques. We've got that scatter on the bottom right on the previous one.
Yeah, sorry, that's good. Yeah.
But we're kind of used to scatters, but we know that not everyone instantly gets them. So we wanted to make sure it was a way of presenting the data in a way that everyone would get, not just people who are used to data visualization. And we had that sort of the whole mess of line charts on the top there. And we kind of felt that was interesting to give context, but it's really hard to show 50 things at once and not overwhelm the reader.
Yeah.
So we tried a few things. This one on the left now, we tried to get the whole index on one screen, but the designers and developers working on their 22-inch Macs would come over to look at my tiny laptop and say, where's the bottom of it? So we kind of knew that we had to make it work on a really small screen. So we ditched a few of these ideas, and I think we're kind of happy with what we got now, but we know that it's an iterative process. We want to make sure that we look at all the feedback we get from the relaunch and listen to what people are saying and asking for, and perhaps even consider having a third chart that you can swap in if that's a sort of concept that you're interested in.
Yeah, it's fascinating. All right, so a couple of things to follow up on that. You designing for different screens. One of the things I see when we speak to Tableau customers, is they get used to building these dashboards on these big screens, and they're really ornate, rich things with detail all over the place. And then you think, well, did you think about how people are going to consume this? And increasingly, most of them are consuming on a mobile. How responsive is it, and what challenges did you face making this responsive?
It's very responsive, and we faced many challenges to get it to be so. Interestingly, the only real difference is the top right-hand panel there doesn't really work on a mobile screen. It's just slightly too wide with all the dots. So that changes to a kind of swarm chart on a mobile, but everything else is pretty much the same. You still can scroll through the whole ranking. You still get the time series, but you just don't quite get everything ordered in that way for the in the top right under overvalue. Yeah. So it was good that we could get all that in there. We know that we get more traffic on desktop for this tool, but we know that generally our website is going more towards mobile, and at weekends almost entirely mobile or tablet.
That's interesting. So this is an anomalous page in some respects, because I guess it's being used for assignments or when people are sitting down maybe researching things. So you have the metrics. This one's obviously used a lot on the desktop.
Yeah, exactly. But in general, we can't guarantee that. We wanted to make sure that you could use it on the mobile.
Interesting. And people don't understand scatter plots, right? It's really that. I just want to pick up on that, because I find that really hard to comprehend. I've been doing data viz for 12 years, so I'm clearly not a naive user, and it's hard to remember that a lot of people don't know what a scatter plot is. Do you think it's up to teams like yours to nudge people forwards to understanding that, or to maybe just stick with what they know and keep it simple?
No, I do think it's up to everyone to nudge people towards the sort of slightly more complex data viz, but hold their hand through it so they get it and that they're used to it. Otherwise, we'll be stuck with lines and bars forever. Yeah. I think there's a real benefit to a very clearly labeled complex chart, where people will have almost a moment of revelation after 30 seconds and go, that's what it means. And from then on, they'll be able to read that type of chart.
Yeah, I think that hand-holding is really challenging, isn't it? Sometimes you don't have the space. So how do you find the space to explain people?
Exactly.
And Scott Klein from ProPublica, he did loads of great research about the history of charts, and he found was it a scatter plot used in one of the American papers from the turn of the 20th century, and it explained in detail how to read this chart, because it was a revolution, right?
Exactly. So what we try and do, especially with our print charts, is just add that extra sort of text layer of explanation. It could just be an arrow pointing in one direction saying this is getting worse or something, and it seems a bit obvious to people who are used to them, but for people who aren't, it just really gives them a way into the chart.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great. Right now, last question on this for now, and obviously if anybody has questions, do put them in the comments box. We'll take all questions we can. Talk about interactivity. What are your views on interactivity on charts? Is it something that we still need in charts for the web, or are people interested in interactivity? How did you balance that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I came to The Economist from the EIU as an interactive chart developer.
Economist Intelligence Unit.
Yeah, yep. Sorry. So I was obviously very keen on interactives at that point. Now that I run a team who, some of whom make interactives, and now that I see how hard it is to make an interactive work on mobiles, desktops, and tablets, we do fewer, but we do them better. And I think though it's really important that you don't just design for one and think, people will get it on a mobile. You kind of have to maybe have a very different approach so that they still get something from it, and it might be a very different looking chart, but that takes so much longer. So you really have to sort of dedicate the resources to getting something that works everywhere.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. And then do people even know they can interact with these things? How much do you leave on the table?
Exactly. When I started, I would recreate a print chart, make it interactive, and I would copy it so closely that no one would know it's interactive. So I kind of failed at that. Once you realize it was great, but so there's a real danger in sort of following established techniques too much on an interactive tool.
Yeah, very interesting. Brilliant. Right, now, before we move on to some of the work you've been doing, Marie, since you joined The Economist, I guess we'll just talk about the Big Mac Index and the data viz community, because we've got some pretty cool stuff already happened and some interesting stuff coming up. So some of the audience may know or may not know that just recently we used the Big Mac Index data at IronViz at Tableau Conference Europe. So here's a photograph of IronViz. We had 3 Tableau customers, experts in using Tableau, and they had 20 minutes to build live a visualization using the Big Mac Index and any other data they wished to bring in, for which they used Tableau Prep. Now, they had several weeks to prepare for this event, but they built it live in 20 minutes. The results were pretty spectacular. And it's just incredible seeing experts in the tool build this stuff so quickly. But what were your takes on this, Marie and Alex? How was it being in the audience?
I thought it was amazing. I was that's why I'm speechless now. It's a shame you don't have sound. It was listening to people cheering and stuff while people were creating data viz in front of you was very cool. Seeing what the very different ways the 3 finalists used the Big Mac data and combined it with other data sources was fascinating. The speed of it was really quite scary, because I initially thought that they just started from scratch in 20 minutes, and I thought this took us weeks to do our it wasn't quite the same. But just the fact that they got 3 such very different stories from the one data source with whatever else they wanted, and it was kind of encouraging that some of the techniques they used we were using in our redesign. So yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. And Marie, how was your take on the IronViz competition?
It was incredible. I thought it was so exciting to watch the 3 of them recreate the Big Mac Index from their perspective. I mean, I think it was Dania who almost recreated it in terms of the design, which I thought was really interesting to see someone trying to copy, well, not copy, but
an homage, I think.
A tribute to the very distinct Economist visual style. It was just amazing to think. We got Japanese demographic data, Venezuelan demographic data, and
interesting.
Food prices for all the commodities that go into a Big Mac from Klaus, the winner, which is the one on the left of the screen here. Just amazing, and that is going to continue because I'm really excited about this. On the 30th of July, Makeover Monday is going to be doing The Economist Big Mac Index data. So anybody watching who doesn't know what Makeover Monday is, basically Eva and Andy share a chart and the data set on a Sunday and say, hey, remake this data in a better way. Can't improve on the Big Mac Index, maybe just a different way. Find a story and tell a story. So that's going to be really interesting. What do you think? What are you looking out for? What are you excited about that?
I'm kind of hoping it's not much better than what we've done, but there are different constraints, obviously. I just think I've never seen someone else's take on a chart that hasn't taught me something new about the data or about how to visualize it. So I'm just looking forward to seeing a whole bunch of them. Yeah,
it's going to be really good because I mean the Makeover Monday community is doing amazing things, and every week you're like, wow, how long did that take? And then how did they discover that stuff? So that's on the 30th of July, and I believe you might be writing a recap post giving your judgment. Judgment is the wrong word, but your thoughts on that. Is that right?
Yes.
Great, excellent. All right, so that's great. Right, well, we'll move on now to Marie, focusing a little bit more on the stuff you've been doing and talking about how we build charts for social media. Again, if you have anybody in the audience with questions, do type them. But Marie, you made quite a splash with a couple of posts on Medium, sort of explaining how you've come in from an education background, and you're like, well, how can we rethink how charts work on social media? And it was really interesting. I mean, it was a great post, fascinating, and I think very applicable to anybody working with data, because Well, in fact, you tell us. Why don't you tell us some of the approach, and then we'll have a conversation from there.
I think, well, so the reason why I initially started or embarked on this project is because I'm really passionate about data journalism, and I think if you follow outlets like the New York Times, Spiegel, Economist, whoever really, sometimes you realize that they tend to undersell their interactive stories and their data-driven interactives. And that's just because, you know, the people who work on the social team don't really have an in into the data team. And so they don't really know what you can do with the data and how you can present it in an engaging way on social media. And I think, you know, social media is super important in terms of traffic, and it's really important to show people on social media that this is a different kind of story. This is not just a normal article with a picture. This is something that's driven by data and that's super engaging, and you can explore the data. And yeah, that's why I think I've been thinking about how to showcase data journalism on social media a lot.
Well, here's the post. What are there 3 tips that anybody listening could go and apply to make more engaging charts right now?
I think if you're thinking about social media, one thing that's really important is that you open with something that's really eye-catching, even if it's a GIF that's animated, so there's like engaging movement or they're really good colors. I think it's super important to pay attention to that, because, you know, people scroll past it in a couple of seconds. And you want there to be something that says this is something different to what you normally see right from the get-go, so that people don't just scroll past. And then I think what's also really important are the words you use. I know that people in data tend to think a lot about visualization and colors and how you show something. And so the editorial copy or the tweet or Facebook post or what goes along with it sometimes doesn't have a priority, unfortunately, that I think it deserves. I think you know, words are super important in journalism, but also for data, honestly, and on social media. So I think
I'm building a presentation for our Tableau conference in New Orleans, which is all about how to present charts on a big screen. You know, as soon as you are putting charts on a big screen, and you know, and as I think about that, because our eyes are so good at seeing small changes and, you know, angles, the data bit can actually be really small. And so, you know, you've got this massive space offered in a chart just to put, you know, a 3-word conclusion that they can read, you know, so they see the words and then they go like, oh yeah, the little data kind of supports what's said. And it feels weird after 10 years to be coming to that conclusion that, yeah, the words could be bigger than the chart. It's like, no, that feels like heresy, right? But tell me about, sorry, say again.
No, don't say it too loud. Like
I won't say it, but I am going to say it. But GIFs, right? Animated GIFs in social media. There's a lot of people who don't like that in their scrolling feed. I personally think they're great. Have you done any testing or on whether they're more or less effective, or are you going on intuition that you feel like it's the right thing?
I think it really depends on the story, actually. So that's something else I'd say. It really depends on the story generally. Look at what you got. Look at the visualizations you can work with. So, for example, for what I've done with the Big Mac Index, you know, we had this really nice chart in the top right corner, and that shrinks to like this like swarm kind of chart on mobile and on laptops. And I've worked with that because that works better for social media as well. So yeah, if you have different elements or different stories, really think about what you pour your effort into and your energy. And yeah, I'd say.
I think that there's one challenge, you know, as I follow data journalism, I mean, and anything on social media, but you see this in data journalism, is I think novelty catches people's attention. And you're like, wow, check out Snowfall or some of Nigel Holleran's incredible video data journalism work. But then when people try and repeat it, it's not as successful, because actually it's the novelty which gets you in. So is that something you're trying to think about? Are you always trying to come up with new ideas, or are you just hoping that you're engaging enough to stop people?
I mean, I think data gifts and a new invention. I didn't come up with data gifts. I think, people like Lena Gröger have been doing data gifts for a while, and other outlets have done data gifts in the past. So it's not like it's something completely new and mind-blowing, to be honest.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think what's really important is that you want to tell a story with that. You don't just want to, show something. You want to tell a story. You want to. So we on the social media team, we think a lot about providing some sort of value to our social followers. That goes beyond just getting them to click, but delivering something that's unique on social, and that's valuable to them.
Yeah, indeed. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about interactivity and the hard work it requires. What about, so I mean, you can both answer this question, but I guess Marie first. What about the impact on the production pipeline of creating a new version, and maybe then thinking, how are we going to animate this? How does that fit within the pipeline, and linking your print chart to your tweet chart to your blog chart?
You mean when I create a data GIF from what's already there?
So let's say you're going to do a chart on witchcraft trials in Europe, which I know you did last year, and I loved that chart. You're going to do a print version, a blog version, and maybe a social media version. How does that fit? Does that explode the pipeline and make life challenging? What's your process for production?
I think what's really good is that there are different people working on different things, and I've been really lucky because I'm working so closely with the data team. I'm part of the data team, and I'm there from the get-go. So when we talk about the story, when we talk about the chart, I'm already there, and everyone else who's working on it is in the room, and so everyone kind of works on their bits and ends, and I think we just work together quite well.
Alex, anything to add?
Yeah, so one question that I saw popped up and then disappeared, but I'll answer anyway because it's so relevant, is in the times before Marie, we would make an interactive, we'd spend a long time creating it, we'd publish it, and then we'd instantly get on to the next thing, because that was our sort of production pipeline. And we didn't really have anyone whose job it was to think about how we should promote that on social. But because we've now got Marie, and because she's there from the very beginning, she's thinking about that while we're designing it. And she might ask us for a certain kind of asset while we're doing it anyway, which will save time. And then once we publish, she'll be the one person that makes sure that it gets the sort of push on social that it needs while we get on with the next thing. So the pipeline is now having someone who's really focused on making that work on social media, which we never used to have.
I think it's one thing that fascinates me is all these tools that make life easier to use have not made the production time any shorter. I was really lucky to visit the Economist offices a few years ago, and Graham Douglas showed me some of the old, paper drawn, hand stippled stuff, and it's like, wow, if only we had software to make this quicker. Well, we have software to make it quicker, but it hasn't actually saved any time, has it? It's just enabled us to do more. Or has it?
Yeah, no, the work's expanded to fill the new time we've got. But I think a good example, which kind of does answer what you're getting at, is we did a chart quite recently on penalty shootouts because during the World Cup, and we got some really good data from Opta about where the shots go, not exactly, but the sort of the general section of the goal. So we made that as a print chart. It was a really good story, and we used it just as a static to promote that story. But then we thought, wouldn't it be good to sort of see how that works in a sort of more animated fashion? So we did that really quickly. We used Excel, don't hate And we just turned it into an animated GIF very fast, knowing that it was only going to go on social media. Yeah, so this one, and it was just a more engaging way of sort of seeing where the shots go. So that was worth doing, but the animated version only had its life on social media. It didn't go on an interactive page anywhere, but that's worth doing, I think, especially if
did you see great engagement with that tweet and then click through to get to the article?
Yes, exactly. So we with that one, we could very easily measure the static versus the animated version. And when it's something, during a World Cup, and I was pushing this out just before penalty shootouts were starting. So people are looking at Twitter anyway. So it's very eye-catching. It really sort of it's interesting data. That is worth doing, I think. And it didn't even take that long. It crashed.
It definitely stopped me in my tracks when I saw it. So yeah, good job. Right, I've got a couple of questions coming in from the comments. So thank you. Obviously, anybody else with questions, please type them. We've got one saying, can animated data be made accessible, such as for people with vision issues?
So that's, I think that question aims at, I don't know, I think there was this article about people who struggle with interactivity generally. I honestly don't have an answer to that. I think the good thing is that we tend to do both. So we push out a GIF, but we also push out a static version that's not the GIF, but still links to the article, has a static chart. But
would it be right that every tweet has a link to an article, right? Is that right?
Pretty much, although there's been one or two which are interesting where the tweet is the story. That's kind of hard to do, but when it's done well, it can be worthwhile doing.
Because I think that generally where the article is a link, I mean, I don't know whether this is an answer, but because you have the graphic detail blog where you are explaining the data behind the story, in some ways is the story is the accessible version of the chart, maybe?
Yeah, so what you don't want is a very fast moving GIF that you think is interesting, but you can't quite tell, and it's over too fast, and then you just don't go to the story. You want, what Marie will always try and do is get timing right so that you understand exactly what it's telling you, and then you can click through to the story to find out more, to read more about that story.
Yeah, interesting. Great. Okay.
Really
sorry, go ahead, Marie.
It's a really interesting question, and I wish I had more of an answer to that, because when I do stuff for Instagram, that means we can't really link back to the article, so it's a standalone video.
Yeah.
In that case, because you can't do GIFs, so it just comes as an MP4.
Yeah, and I think this is a hard question to crack.
Something we should definitely think about in the future.
Yeah, indeed. Okay. Lots of questions are coming in here. So before we move on to sort of education and data journalism, what's one of your favorite projects that you've worked on while being at The Economist? And if I'm good at typing and using Google, I might even be able to bring it on screen in real time.
Don't bring this one up. It's one I really liked just because it was such a quick turnaround. So this is a story last summer where one of our day's journalists saw that, the site Mumsnet? It's a kind of forum. It's not just for mums, but it's called Mumsnet. There was a story that advertisers were pulling out of advertising on Mumsnet because they found it a bit too sweary and they didn't want to be associated with cussing. So one of our data journalists very quickly scraped 10,000 forums, searched for some very fruity words, and found that they were right. The use of the F-bomb and other curses was going up really dramatically. And interestingly, things like "God damn it" were going down. So he was able to show on a really simple chart that it was true. There was more swearing on Mumsnet, but it was a really quick, entertaining story where it was a data journalism story. He did the scraping, he did the analysis, he created the charts all within a day or two, and it was fun. In print, we were quite demure about the words. We sort of grouped them into strengths, but online we did say which ones they were, because it is interesting seeing exactly which swear words are more popular now.
I won't bring it on the screen.
No, don't bring it up. But that was a fun. I thought that was a really good example of data journalism and how you can quickly prove something, even if it's words rather than numbers, just using computers.
Yeah. And did it have a Economist witty style headline? I bet it did.
Mother cusses, I think, was the headline. Not bad.
It's one of the favourite things about The Economist, those
That's
headlines.
all I do.
Marie, well, have you got a favourite project since you've joined?
I find it hard to choose. I think I really like working on the house price index. It's not quite as fascinating as the Mumsnet story.
Uh,
But it's a data set that affects everybody, right? Especially women, right?
Exactly. So and we've got an international version and a US version, and cool. I think it's so interesting to explore that, and exactly it affects everyone. That's why it works great on social as well. Actually, that makes me think. I really like the higher returns story on. Cost of education.
That was an interesting one. That was our first scrolly telling interactive,
right?
Where one of our data journalists did a lot of work to get data on which careers and professions benefit most from having a university education, which ones don't. There's some very surprising ones where you get a much higher salary, even as a traffic warden or something, if you have a degree. Things you wouldn't associate with necessarily with higher education. And one of our new developers really wanted to try a scrolly telling sort of immersive kind of way of doing it. I said it would never work on our website. He totally proved me wrong. It's a really nice, it's just another treatment of the same story that went in print. So it takes you through all these hundreds, if not thousands of professions. You can hover over them. You can see which countries have more people at university. And Marie made a really nice GIF, which just showed you that I think Singapore is like 80-something% of people who go to university in Singapore, way above the OECD average, etc.
Wow.
So that was a really nice one.
All right. Well, my Google skills have failed to find that in real time, so maybe we'll share the link after this broadcast. Right. We've got some more questions, but I do want to cover the last topic before we finish. There's a lot of people trying to get into this field of just being a data analyst within the big world of corporate business or within social, doing social good with data in education and health and data journalism. And there's more and more data, but there's not more and more people with the right skills to analyze and present this. So let's talk for the next 5 or 6 minutes about some of the skills you might need. Maybe Marie, talk about your own path and what is the best thing somebody could do to become a data journalist and a great data analyst. So Marie, can we start with you, because I know you've sort of come through a great path in the last few years.
Yeah, so I always want to go into journalism, but I'm from Germany, and in Germany people say, "I don't study journalism if you want to be a journalist." So I didn't study journalism at undergrad level. I studied communication, which is kind of close, and English literature and linguistics.
Yeah.
And in Germany, you do a lot of statistics if you do a social science. So when the statistics module ended, I kind of realized that I actually missed it. I wanted to be working with numbers as well. Yeah. So I looked for a master's that would fit that bill. Realized that you can do data journalism and you can study both journalism and computing, and that's what I decided to do at master's level. And then I just interned with lots of different data teams,
So you have quite an interesting skill set, because your background has married the creative liberal arts communication side of things to the sciencey stuff, right? And I mean, I talk about that a lot. There's a lot of books about how that's the perfect combination of skills, because it's great to be, it's great if you're just a hardcore data-driven data scientist, that's great, but everybody needs to be able to communicate to the outside world. I mean, and you know, that's obviously helped you in your career. Alex, what you know, presumably you're looking for new team members. What kind of things have you seen change over the last few years, and you know, what skills do you look for?
Something I've noticed more recently is you get a lot more all-rounders. So people who have some design skills, some coding skills, and writing skills, which I guess a few years ago you would have focused on one or the other. But I think that's probably what data journalism is, really. You need to be able to obviously clean the data, manipulate it, find the stories in it, communicate the story visually, and be able to write about why that's interesting and sort of tell a story in words too. So that's one of the main things. I also see a lot more sort of R and Python and, you know, computer science skills on CVs, which is great. And you need something. It doesn't have to be one of those. Two is great, but you need one way of getting data into shape for what you want to show with it. I grew up with Excel. I still love Excel, and VB, and that does it too. But I've just been learning R recently, and it's kind of mind-blowing and mind-opening about how quickly you can get stuff out.
Yeah. So to what extent do you think statistical the depth of knowledge and of pure statistics is valuable? Because I think you've both said it. Do you need that?
You need to know when you need it, I think. So it's in the same way that I will be a frequent visitor to Stack Overflow when I'm coding anything. The main thing you need is to know what you don't know and when to either ask for help or to search for help. So you don't need a very very strong statistics background, but you need to know your limitations and know who to ask when you're a bit unsure.
That's a really good skill, knowing when you don't know. I really like that. We actually have a data journalism curriculum. Again, we can share this link in the comments, but we have a curriculum for data journalism programs. Should anybody want to start teaching it or find out what that curriculum is, then go check that out. We're coming to the end, so I'm going to ask a couple more questions. I could be asking questions all day, but we do have other things that we need to do eventually. So can you tell us a little bit more about your prototyping and interaction process? Somebody asks.
Yeah, so you'll have seen from the screenshots earlier, we will draw. It's the quickest way of getting something that you can show someone. Most of our visualizers now use R, so we're all teaching ourselves R, because it's so quick to prototype something. So that we'll often do something in R, spit out an SVG, and then do a hell of a lot of design work in Illustrator. But that's kind of what all the visualizers are used to anyway. So they're very comfortable with that. They just can't get the raw product until recently using R. And then with interactives, we have two incredibly good interactive developers who will quickly work something up, put it on a server, send them a link around, and we'll all look and we'll all say, wow, that's amazing, but can it do this too? Generally, we don't really like this. Oh, what about if it did this? We'll plan stuff in advance so we know what the end goal is going to be. But there'll always be a tiny bit of, well, if we could just feature this part as well, it's going to make a real difference. So planning is a big part of it, but sharing early, but not too early, is another part.
Right, brilliant. All right, that's a good one. Okay, here's one somebody typed in. They said, this one is tough. How can we use data to tell better stories to change people's minds?
Marie?
Put me on the spot. I mean, I think when journalists try to tell stories with or without data, they're trying to get information out there and possibly, change people's minds given the fake news crisis or whatever. I think the good thing about data is that people intuitively tend to trust data more. Data, if you see a chart, if you see numbers, that kind of looks like it's proof for something. Obviously, you know, we all know how to lie with statistics. So it's not necessarily always the case that the data is true. You can't always take data at face value, I think.
Yeah.
But generally, I think that data, like, because people do trust data, I think it's an amazing vehicle to tell stories. And I think we should just be telling more data stories.
Yeah.
And also, I think you mentioned that when we talked today, that it's really, really important to make how you work more transparent and be honest about how you approach the data.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I know that was in your blog post. You stated that as one of the sort of your social media goal is to, you know, bring the people out and bring interaction in and seek feedback and question the data, which I think is a really good approach. I mean, there's a lot of research around the fact that if a chart is in a paragraph, people think it's more trustworthy.
Mm-hmm.
But man, that's dangerous, isn't it? Right?
Yes.
I think one of the big trends is, well, obviously we've got fake news trend, but also uncertainty in data. You know, if I draw a line, you know, does that mean it's certain? It's a big challenge, which unfortunately we don't have time to continue because I think it's time to wrap up. Maybe we have to do a whole other live stream just on uncertainty in data, because that would be amazing. I've got one more question. Yeah, I've got one more question from the comments. What does it say? Any difference in the audience? What does it say? Right. Do you have a difference between the audience looking at the Economist's visualizations compared to your general audience who maybe aren't data nerds like the three of us and people on this webinar?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a difference between people who read the newspaper, as we insist on calling it, and who visit the website. So anyone that reads the paper will see our charts, but they obviously won't see them interactively, something we're trying to solve. But on the website, we get a very different sort of set of traffic, mainly because we can show off the charts so nicely on Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah.
So it is a different audience, and it's probably a slightly more data literate audience. But we want to make sure that we're always showing something as clear as we can, and that we don't rely on the fact that our readers are pretty good at sort of working their way through a scatter or something.
Yeah, I noticed you've got a very, very rigid style. That maybe that's the negative word. I mean, I think the style is brilliant, but yeah, I'm just trying to open the app on the phone. You don't, and of course I can't find a chart in the app, but you don't put the interactives in the app. Is that something you might try and do, or bring the web versions of the charts into the app?
Yeah, it's a good point. So until kind of recently, our app was what we called, I don't like the term, a glass newspaper. It was an exact facsimile of the printed product.
Yeah.
We know that people are interested in what we're doing on the web, but they might be so used to only accessing us through the app that they don't really make that separate journey to the website. So we're featuring daily charts in the app now, and we are getting interactors in there too. Yeah. So it's good that we're kind of reaching the more I don't want to use the word rigid either, but we're reaching the more traditional audience with our more sort of dynamic data journalism now.
Yeah, brilliant. Great. All right. That is our final question. And that's the end of, well, the questions I started writing down. I mean, now I've got another 30 or 40 I'd like to ask you, but unfortunately we are out of time. So everybody who's been watching, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you found this useful, and if you want to hear more from these two, maybe say in the comments and we'll try and organize another one in a few weeks. One last plug, don't forget, on the 30th of July, the Makeover Monday team will be doing, will be featuring the Big Mac Index, which is not that slide, which is that slide. So do get involved and see what you can do with the Economist's data and maybe show them some of your skills. That'll be fantastic. Otherwise, with that, Marie, Alex, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
But yeah, and everybody watching, thank you for joining us too, and let us know what you thought, and we'll see you again for the next live stream soon. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.